Big Play Detroit. I am Chris Castellani, joined by my co-host and producer, Austin Sisler, and what an unbelievable time to be starting a Michigan-based sports podcast. It is Selection Sunday, and thankfully, as we saw last year as well, Michigan was on a bit of a drought there for a second, but both these programs have caught up. We have Michigan as a 1 seed, Michigan State as a 3 seed, both going to be playing high leverage games in March as top seeded teams. Lots to discuss. Welcome into today's program. And we're going to start with college hoops, though not necessarily the NCAA tournament draw, but it will transition into that. And just bring up the Big Ten tournament a little bit, which is year in and year out an event that I have a hard time getting a gauge on, because I came into this weekend, Austin, saying to myself, look, goals are in front of you. You won the Big Ten championship. You know what? If you guys get bounced on that Friday noon game against Ohio State, so be it. Michigan didn't. And yet I found myself, a little bit pissed that they lost that championship game. It was like by the time they got there, I'm like, well, I think, you might as well win it. And we will address some of Michigan's issues and their draw. But I think it's safe to say both programs in this state didn't play their best basketball over this most recent weekend. Obviously, Michigan State being a one and done, knocked out by a UCLA team that, looked to their credit, and for all of Mick Cronin's weirdness and ranting, it seems like he's got that team playing well at the right time. Michigan, while going 2-1 this weekend, you could do a heck of a lot worse. I think that this is where expectations change throughout the season. This is a team that thinks they can win the national championship, and we judge them based on that. And look, they're lucky to get by Wisconsin. They had a hard-fought game in the quarterfinal against Ohio State. And then against Purdue, they just got out-toughed. And like I said, we'll discuss the draw, but I think as a whole, both fan bases, maybe not feeling great coming out of this Big Ten tournament weekend, but as a whole, Michigan still finds themselves as a 1 seed. And for anyone wondering, I don't know. They keep this stuff very secretive. I don't think a win against Purdue in the Big Ten tournament championship changes what Michigan's seeding would have been. I think that they would have been that third number 1 seed, and that's exactly what they ended up being. Michigan State comfortably on the 2 line for a while. I think the loss to UCLA definitely pushed them down to the 3 line, and I guess that's kind of where we'll jump into it here. So I'm actually going to start with Michigan State because Michigan State was announced first, and to be honest, I think Michigan State has a more intriguing bracket to talk about. I may end up regretting those words. First of all, and Austin, I think you can speak for me on this. The second I saw Duke as the number 1 overall seed, I'm like, MSU is either the 2 or 3 in this bracket. Like, it is an inevitable thing. I'm not sure. Look, these are 2 blue blood programs, but whether it's 2005, whether it's 2019, whether it's 2013, and now here in 2026, Michigan State and Duke are going to find themselves playing each other at some point, or potentially. Michigan State's got to carry their end of the bargain, as does Duke. But you look at Michigan State's region. They're the number 3 seed in this region. Duke, obviously, the number 1 overall seed, coming in at 32-2. The number 2 seed in this region is obviously UConn. A little bit surprised by the draw there with St. John's winning the Big East regular season and postseason crowns and dropping to a 5 seed, while UConn gets a 2 in that same region. I guess it's kind of trying to remove the way that things went against UCLA. Your initial gut reaction to Michigan State's draw, how are you feeling?
I feel like it's pretty predictable, but also pretty fair. The Duke thing, it happens seemingly every year. I didn't know if it would continue after Coach K retired. It has. Michigan State and Duke, they're just set to duke it out forever, it seems. And you know what? Earlier in the season, when they played in the regular season, this was pretty early on, they had a pretty hard-fought game. So, for as talented as Duke is with Cam Boozer and everyone that they have there, if it comes to it and Michigan State has to play them, I think they've got a shot. Now, as far as Michigan State's seed, I was kind of expecting a 3 even before Michigan State fell to UCLA because, Michigan State pretty historically has been underseeded. They got a 2 seed the year that they wound up falling to Middle Tennessee State. A lot of people thought they should have got a 1 seed. Very often they get 4 seeds when they should get 3 seeds. Last year, they had a more talented team with guys like Jace Richardson. You have Trey Holloman there as well, so you have two pretty good ball handlers. You had a deeper backcourt. But this year, I mean, Jeremy Fears is a fantastic player. Guys like Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler have developed so well. This team just is not as talented or as deep as the team the year before. So, especially after that loss to UCLA, I was not surprised that they got a 3 seed. I think, as long as you can make it to the Sweet 16, everything after that is kind of just, extra. I really would love a win against UConn. I think, we kind of owe them for, they gave us a loss in the tournament back in 2014 when Michigan State had one of the best starting fives I think Tom Izzo has ever had between, he had Keith Appling, Gary Harris, Denzel Valentine, Brandon Dawson, and Adrian Payne. It was just a phenomenal starting five. They made it to the Elite Eight, wound up falling to UConn and Kemba Walker, who wound up going all the way. So, if we make it to the Sweet 16 and have to play them for a trip to the Elite Eight, I would love to get them back. It's a pretty predictable draw, as I said, pretty fair draw, so not really sweating over anything.
It's a very strange thing, Austin. We'll transition to Michigan here in a second, but the fact is, unless you're a 1 seed, there's going to be somebody in your bracket that you are afraid of or that has had a better season than you. So it's like, if you're looking at, hey, oh my God, we got to play UConn in the Sweet 16. Yeah, you don't really play 16 seeds by the time you get to that round. This is admittedly a tough draw. I think a lot of it is tough draw in brand name because UConn, Duke, obviously championship pedigrees. Michigan State's won one in the past. I think in terms of names, it's the most loaded bracket. But yeah, look, I've seen a lot of people say Michigan State's ceiling is probably the Sweet 16. I think this draw kind of, I'm not going to say confirms that we got a lot of basketball still to be played, but I think a lot of people are looking at this bracket and saying, even when you include St. John's, who's on the other side of this thing, that there's simply teams that are playing better than MSU is right now. As far as Michigan is concerned, look, they're going to have to wait a little bit to figure out who their opponent is going to be on Thursday. They're going to be playing the winner of Howard and UMBC. I'll just kind of keep it simple here and say when I looked at this initial bracket, Michigan going to be opening, I believe, in either, is it Philadelphia? I think in Buffalo, New York. I'm sorry. I think Michigan State opening in Philly. But I look at this bracket, and look, there's some established teams. Texas Tech in the Elite Eight a year ago. Alabama with Nate Oates in the Final Four a few years back. You have Tennessee with Rick Barnes, who's consistently been in the tournament every single year. 3-seeded Virginia team, which is this is obviously a much different Virginia group than the ones that made those deep runs under Tony Bennett back in 2014, going to the Sweet 16, 2019, winning the national championship. The one matchup that does scare me potentially, and look, all these games scare me in a way. I'm going to be consistent with this, man. Everything's back at 0 now. There's a randomness, and there are outliers in this tournament. With that said, I think Iowa State as that 2-seed matchup is potentially a really difficult one for Michigan. Michigan has the players to do it, but the one thing that I've seen when I've watched Iowa State over the last few years is they've seen really an incredible program turnaround. I think before, I always get this name right, Otzelberger got there. I think I got that right. They were winless in conference, and now they've been one of the top teams in the Big 12 over the last few years. But look, we've seen Michigan go into these ruts offensively, and we saw them do it this most recent weekend, where whether it be because of just sloppiness, poor shot selection, turnovers, where the offense will get into these stretches where they're a little bit vulnerable. Iowa State is a team that applies a lot of pressure. They play really good defense, top 10 nationally in defensive efficiency. You get into a one-and-done situation where Michigan goes through one of those 5-minute stretches where they have 6 turnovers and I was about to say 6 turnovers in 5 possessions. That's impossible. 6 turnovers in 7 possessions, something like that. I think that could be really dangerous. Michigan as the 1 seed, and I think this is the case with a lot of 1 seeds, their biggest enemy is sometimes themselves. I know what Michigan's best is. We've seen it this year. They don't really have to prove that to anybody. They've got 31 wins worth of evidence to show that they're one of the elite teams in the country, but against Purdue, they got a little bit banged up. They were out-physicaled and out-toughed, and that was something that we've rarely seen from Michigan this year. So, look, I don't want to spend every waking second being like, what if they play this team? What if they play this team? Because The matchups will be the matchups. You know, there's a lot of randomness, like I said, in this tournament. These are two teams, and I think you can agree with me on this, Austin, that are capable of getting to that third weekend. And that is very exciting in this state. That hasn't always been the case. I think for Michigan State, a lot of things need to go right. And of course, for Michigan, a lot of things need to go right. I have more confidence right now in this Michigan team than almost any other I had. We'll talk a little bit more about them as we get deeper into the show, but that will do it for the first segment. We will be right back to talk a little bit NFL talk. We are not done talking about the selection show. We're not done talking about the NCAA tournament. We have plenty else to preview and discuss, but we want to talk a little bit of Lions offseason stuff when we return. All right, we are back. Segment number 2 here. Like I said, we will continue to talk about the NCAA tournament and the draws for both Michigan and Michigan State. We are going to discuss the Big Ten as a whole because I think the big elephant in the room, and this applies to Michigan, Michigan State, and the other, now whatever it is, 16 other teams in this conference. No natty for this conference since Michigan State won it all with the Flintstones back in 2000. Crazy to think about. We will talk more about that, but I want to discuss the Detroit Lions a little bit, who had a very active week, I would say, on the free agent market. And it's interesting because, and I've been saying this for a minute, I look at every one of these signings, and I'm generally fine with all of them. The move, I think, that stands out for a lot of people, not just in terms of the culture and what they've been trying to build here, but I think also just as a fit for this roster. Isaiah Pacheco, running back, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs, the pride of Rutgers, came from Piscataway, had a very nice run with Kansas City, won a few Super Bowls, signs with the Detroit Lions. I think that this is fantastic. I see really no complaints about this. You have a guy who's going to be capable of backing up Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'm not trying to throw shade at David Montgomery here, but I don't think Isaiah Pacheco has any pretense here. I don't think there's any belief that he can chase or exceed or equal the number of carries that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get. And I think that Montgomery, understandably, got a little bit frustrated with the fact that as time went on, he started as RB1, and by the end of last season, really even middle of last season, he was RB2. Pacheco knows what his role is going to be. He's a tremendous short yardage back. Now replacing David Montgomery, so you now have the return to that 1-2 punch, and there was some wonder if they were going to try to make a run to get a running back in the draft. It seems like that's not the case. The other, and I could focus on all these, and I want to let you talk here in a second. Two others that are worth pointing out. Tyler Conklin, signed formerly of Michigan State and formerly of the Minnesota Vikings to play tight end. No problem with it individually. I think that obviously Laporta, who when he plays is one of the best tight ends in this sport, but missed a good chunk of time and has missed a good chunk of time over the last few seasons. Tight ends in Drew Petzing's system have been extremely important. It's something that they've talked about for a long time. Adding Conklin to that mix, both as a receiver and a run blocker, I think is totally fine. I don't want to go down this road, but I just the Tesla pick, and I like him, is making less and less sense as time goes on, especially with the OC that you just brought on. I don't think that's a knock on his talent or what he's able to do. We saw it in bunches, but I think the signing of Conklin and some of these moves indicates that I feel like the offensive scheme might be going one way, whereas you have Tesla, who's a player who's kind of going in another. And then the last one, Cade Mays, multi-year deal from the Carolina Panthers. They needed a center, obviously, as they try to revamp this offensive line. The positives, and it's very strange that you say this about an offensive lineman, but tremendous in pass protection, needed. That's the one thing that allowed this offense to thrive the way that it did under Ben Johnson, was the fact that they protected what was admittedly not a mobile quarterback in Jared Goff, but not great as a run protector. And I think last year the Lions offense started to sputter a little bit at points when they were incapable of running the ball. That doesn't mean he can't improve, and that doesn't mean they aren't going to make other moves. So the way I stand on it, and this will be the last thing I'll say before I toss it over to you, I'm fine individually with all of these moves. None of them bother me. I don't look at any of them and say they don't make sense. I think when you assess the holes on this roster, every single one of these moves fills one of those holes. And I usually hate doing this kind of pass-fail system. Where's the added pass rush? This entire offseason in so many ways is going to be dependent on how they address that. Now, we still got a draft, right? And if that's the case, and you might be relying on a rookie, but that's the only like major negative that I have right now. I saw a grade, it might have been Bleacher Report, forgive me, I should cite my sources here, or at least know them, that gave the Lions a C plus grade in free agency so far. I think that's totally fair because I don't think they've done anything above and beyond. But I do think that they've done enough to address the holes that are currently on their roster. I'll toss it over to you. What do you think? Is there anything I'm saying that I'm leaving out?
Yeah, I think this is the first offseason since that season where the Lions went 9-8 and beat the Packers to knock them out of the playoffs at the end of the season, where there's really a lot up in the air and a lot still to be decided. I remember after that season, I was pretty upset that they let Jamal Williams walk. He was, a huge piece of that team. He was part of the heart of that team. And I think they let Isaiah Buggs walk that season as well. May have been the season after, something like that. But, that same offseason, Brad Holmes winds up drafting Brian Branch, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, all these guys who have been huge pieces to this team. And look, they've still got a lot of holes on this roster. I think the signings that they've made so far have made a lot of sense. Cade Mays, he's only 26 years old compared to Graham Glasgow and Taylor Decker, who are both like 33, 32 years old. So you've got some youth on your side there. His PFF grade was higher than Graham Glasgow's at center. And his contract was cheaper than Taylor Decker's. So I feel like Brad Holmes is trying to find ways to be efficient with their money. The Tyler Conklin deal, it's interesting in a couple ways because he brought up Drew Petzing's offense, the way he likes to run them. He gets a lot of tight ends involved. I know some people were kind of wondering a little bit if that might mean maybe Sam Laporta might not be ready for the beginning of the season. That's totally possible. But Tyler Conklin, even if that's the case, I believe he's caught over 50 passes in like 4 of his last 5 seasons or something like that. So he's a piece that will be productive for you. Lions also brought back Teddy Bridgewater as a backup quarterback, which I think it's a big deal. If Goff goes down, a lot of people are going to be pretty upset. I've said before, if he goes down, season's probably over. But Teddy Bridgewater is one of those backup quarterbacks that can kind of keep you afloat for a little while. So to me, that's a big deal. Isaiah Pacheco as well. As you mentioned, his role is defined. He's not going to be competing with Gibbs for that RB1 role. He's going to be RB2. And his contract is much cheaper than David Montgomery's. I believe he's earning at just over $1 million for this season. David Montgomery was earning over like $10 million per year. I was crushed when they traded David Montgomery because I thought he was, a great piece here. I think a lot of people didn't realize how valuable he really was, but you have a solid backup running back that can, get some carries to try and keep Gibbs healthy. And if Gibbs goes down, Pacheco is going to be productive enough for you. And also too, with some of these trades, or some of these guys that we've released, Brad Holmes has now accumulated 9 draft picks for this upcoming draft, and that's his greatest currency. I believe he has first rounder, 2 second rounders, no third, but 2 fourths, I believe a 5th, 2 sixths, and maybe a 7th, something like that. But the Lions also missed the playoffs, so they're going to be picking roughly in the middle of each round as well. So they still have a lot of holes to fill. And I'll be interested to see how they do that. I will say I was also kind of crushed that they let Anzalone walk because as of right now, I think their starting linebacker room is Campbell, who had a great season last year, but then Malcolm Rodriguez and Derek Barnes, who have been really important pieces to this team, but more complementary pieces and role players and things like that. Anzalone is a guy who has been with this team through thick and thin. I wouldn't have minded overpaying him just a little bit to stay. But it looks like, Brad Holmes is being cutthroat this offseason. So I trust him to make the moves that, the Lions need to make. He is fantastic in the draft, and he's proven that over and over again. But, this is going to be a pretty huge one for the Lions to get back on top.
And I want to just add to that. Look, and he's kind of a fan favorite. He was a Hard Knocks darling. I get it, but at a certain point, man, Malcolm Rodriguez, they got to figure out a way to stay in the field. And it's not, I'm not trying to question his toughness or anything like that. Like, this is a hard game. I understand it, but I just feel like the last 2 seasons, there's just not a large enough sample size for me to really form an opinion about how good he can be. Best ability is availability. He's got to be on the field. The last point here, and I made a mistake probably not bringing this up. They also restructured Jared Goff's contract, freeing up about $32 million in cap space for 2026. Look, this seemed like something that was going to be inevitable at some point. I always appreciate when athletes do this. It's one of the things I really like. This is one of the things I actually prefer about the NFL over MLB is that, yes, there is some guaranteed money, but there's also a salary cap. You can restructure contracts. Players are okay with it. And Goff is in the business of winning. And I think that Jared Goff, he's not delusional in the sense that he's very much aware of what his own limitations are as a quarterback. And I think he probably learned that during probably the first year that he was here and even probably the last few years that he was playing under McVay's system. Goff is a really good quarterback, but in order for him to be great, there needs to be a system around him that is competent. And I think at points last year, even though the numbers, objectively speaking, were still fine, there were games where he struggled, and there were games where this offense struggled, especially when they played top-tier defenses. You look at the the Pittsburgh game at points. You look at the game where they went to Philly. You look at the games against Minnesota. Offense kind of sputtering out often. You can blame play calling on part of that, but I think the pressure on Goff at points got to him. Not as much time in the pocket. I think that's a big restructure. I'm glad they did that, and it hopefully allows the Lions to continue to go out and spend a little bit more money. So we will be back here for segment number 3. Got some Tigers talk. We got some World Baseball Classic talk because this has been a fascinating, in some ways controversial, but also very fun event. As of the time that we're recording this, the U.S. game just ended against the Dominican Republic. We will talk about that in a second. And we're back. It is segment number 3 here on Big Play Detroit. Chris Castellani joined by Austin Sisler. This is our baseball segment, and I do want to talk a lot of Tigers stuff, mainly one particular player, one particular position, but I want to do a little bit of a recap, a breakdown of the last week that was for the World Baseball Classic. I don't want to bore people too much. The United States moving on to the semifinals, they knock off the Dominican Republic by a final score of 2-1. Pretty unbelievable game. And look, what they say about this tournament is true. The atmosphere is amazing. The energy is amazing. Like, it lives up to the hype. I find myself, and I want the U.S. to win, and I like this event. The World Baseball Classic is the second kidney of baseball. It's not completely necessary, but I'm glad it exists. I'm really happy that it's there. It gives me something to look forward to as we inch ever so closer to the Major League Baseball season. But there's a few reasons why I found myself just a little peeved with this World Baseball Classic. Number one, I might just be a curmudgeon. I might just be having one of my mood swings. Possible. I've had plenty in my days. Number two, people need to calm the F down about this Tarek Skubal stuff. I would like to talk to him. I am stunned at the number of people who are holding Tarek Skubal and his one start of the WBC against him. It is crazy how vitriolic people have gotten. Where I've seen media in this state that are saying, you know what? Playing for your country in this case is more important than playing for your major league team. In this instance, no, it is not. Austin, you can bleep that. Sorry. But that is a crazy take. Let me tell you something. If Tarek Skubal goes out on opening day against the San Diego Padres, where he's going to make his first start of the year and pitches 6-7 scoreless innings, there's not going to be a single person. This is why we live in such a reactionary culture. There's not going to be a single person that's going to act like they ever cared about the WBC. Like, I understand, should he have been maybe more committed, or was it marketed wrong? Fine. But people are still talking. It's been 10 days. I'm spending too much time on it. Lastly, this U.S. team, look, there's a remarkably talented team, and I know in the U.S. there's a certain way they go about playing baseball, and I respect it, but I'm sure their hearts are in it. Visually, when compared to other teams, it doesn't look like it. Like, watching this team is like going to a concert, right? and the concert starts. It's like the Going to Work Pistons, where you got Mason on the PA and you got flames shooting out of the hoops, and you're playing the final countdown, and then the Little River Band starts playing. Okay, there's a place for that. Like, that's fine. But given all the energy that exists in this event, you'd kind of expect something a little bit more grandiose, and I think that's why, like, the young guys have thrived so much, is that the guys like Gunnar Henderson or Roman Anthony, PCA, these guys, like, these are energetic players in an energetic event. So it's been interesting to watch. Look, I want to see him win the whole thing. That's just how I stand on it. Like, I'm not. It's become this very controversial thing, especially locally here with the Scooble stuff, that I don't feel like it needs to be. It's just there. It's something to watch. It's fun. Gives you a team to root for a few weeks, and then for the next few years, we forget the whole thing happened. So moving on, let's talk about the Tigers here, because I want to talk about one player in particular, and it's Parker Meadows, who's one of the only guys here that we're paying attention to in spring. We're paying attention to his numbers because of how things went for him a year ago. And while he's looked a little bit better over the last few days, I think got on base 2 or 3 times in the game on Saturday, has not looked good offensively, and is in a lot of alliteration here. But Parker is in a pretty precarious position in the sense that him potentially making the team would possibly be the reason why Kevin McGonigal doesn't, even though they play different positions. Like, you've turned Hobby into that hybrid role, and there is a universe of Hobby in center, McGonigal at short, Parker starting in AAA, where you have the potential as well for Parker in center, Hobby at short, and Hobby's going to make the team, and then McGonigal starting the year in AAA, which I think would be much to the chagrin of a lot of Tiger fans. The question I wanted to ask you, Austin, is just, and I want to throw it out there, Tiger fans as well. I think that we're pretty set on the idea of Kevin McGonigal being this team's opening day shortstop. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that's where our hearts are right now. Is there anything that you need to see from Parker Meadows in the remainder of spring that's going to make you think that he is the best option for this team to be starting in center field on opening day? Or is he one of those guys who quite simply just is at a point where he needs to prove it across a full 162 game slate?
Yeah, with Parker, it's something I think I just need to see it to believe it. I mean, I'm wildly impressed by his speed and his defense. They are absolutely elite in the upper tier. But he can't consistently stay healthy, and he hasn't proven that he can be a consistent hitter. We don't need him to be one of the best hitters on this team. We just need him to get on base so then he can score runs. If he draws a walk, then he can steal second base, score on a base hit up the middle. So we need him to be not just productive in the outfield and make all of these dazzling plays, but productive at the plate as well. And so far, he hasn't really shown that he can do that consistently. He was great down the stretch in 2024. Last year would have been a great year for him to prove that he can do that consistently, but unfortunately he dealt with injury struggles. Vierling was hurt too, and then we wound up putting Javier Baez in center field, and he wound up making the all-star team as a center fielder, which is just ridiculous. He's got a lot of people he's got to fight for that job now, because you have those two that I just mentioned, Wenzel Perez as well, and Max Clark isn't too far behind him. So I do think Parker will probably make the team out of camp. I still kind of think I'm leaning towards that the Tigers will do the whole service time manipulation with Kevin McGonigal. But after that, personally, I would probably keep Parker up here and maybe send Wenzel Perez down to the minor leagues. But Wenzel has proven that he can stay healthy and that he can be, a productive big league hitter. Plus, he's a switch hitter, which is a tool that Parker doesn't have. And we have so many lefties on this team. So it'll be interesting to see. I really hope that Parker can develop at this stage in his career. And he's proven in the past that he can do that, because there was a point when he was down with West Michigan where he was hitting in the low 200s for a really long period of time. And I was wondering if he was even going to be able to make it to the major leagues. And lo and behold, here he is. So, I'm hoping that he can figure it out, because if he can, he could be a pretty impactful player on this team.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up one other thing, because I think I'm making it out to seem like it's down to Parker and McGonigal. I'm getting the impression, whether it's in spring or the way things went for him a year ago, that Wenzel Perez's stock is dropping a little bit. Not good in October last season. You know, it was actually quite good after coming off the IL, but I think that there's this belief with Wenzel that what he's been his first 2 years in the league is essentially like what his ceiling is. You know, he was a guy that was in the minor leagues for a long time, grinded his way through the system, and now he's here. And there's a lot that he can offer to the team, but it wouldn't shock me if Parker were to see a pretty good few weeks down the stretch here of him potentially being the guy that starts the year down in AAA. I also think just from a mental standpoint, I think Wenzel would handle that better than Parker would. That's not me trying to knock on Parker. I just think it's something to watch out for. Wenzel lauded for being an overwhelmingly positive presence in that clubhouse. I'd prefer him, but AJ is obviously going to have some decisions to make. So that will do it for segment number 3. We will be back here in just a second as we go to our All Say This segment, continuing to talk about the NCAA tournament, continuing to talk about the Big Ten and where they stand. Is this the year they break the streak? We'll talk about it next. We are back for segment number 4, and I am a man of my word. I promised that we would continue to talk about the NCAA tournament, a plethora of Big Ten teams in this thing. That includes Michigan as a 1 seed, Michigan State as a 3 seed, but we are focusing solely on the Big Ten for today's I'll Say This segment. Austin, what is today's I'll Say This?
I'll say this. The Big Ten's national title drought will continue. Now, look, the Big Ten is a Power 4 school at this point, no longer Power 5. You've got like 20 teams in the Big Ten. I believe 9 made the big dance. You have a national title contender in Michigan who is a top 3 team and have been pretty much all season long. They are the best Michigan team that I've seen in my lifetime, and very few Michigan State teams would compare to this Michigan team. You have roughly 5 teams in the Big Ten that have been like top 15 teams all season, you know, with Michigan State, Purdue, who just won the Big Ten tournament, Illinois, all of these schools, and even like Wisconsin, you know, they wound up beating you guys earlier this season. They threatened you again here in the Big Ten tournament. They're a pretty good team. But, you know, you look at Michigan, who has the best chance to go the distance. LJ Kaysen is out for the season. Yaxel looks like he might be hobbled a little bit. He got hurt in that final game. Purdue wound up knocking you guys off. You're starting to look a little bit vulnerable there. And also, too, with the tournament, I mean, there's 68 teams in this tournament. Very few times have the teams that, you know, should have won the tournament actually done so. And then you look at, you know, some of these other teams. Michigan State, you know, I'll ride or die for them. Most of the time Izzo teams that he's had over the years have been teams filled with like 4-year guys, walk-on players, projects that he's developed. And I love these teams to death. But, you know, if Jeremy Fears has to step off the court for a breather or something like that, Michigan State could be in trouble. Same with the bigs, too. I think Cam Ward is going to be a wonderful player as he develops here at Michigan State. But right now, with your bigs, you know, if Kohler and Cooper aren't on the court, you're in trouble. Purdue, Matt Painter, phenomenal coach. Braden Smith is an all-time player there. But they are not as well-rounded as some of the teams that they've had in the past. And you can just, you know, go down the list, whether you're looking at Illinois or Nebraska as well. There's a lot of pressure on them to win their first game here because they've been struggling down the stretch. And yet this is the best Nebraska team that there has been. They haven't won a March Madness game ever, you know, so there's a lot of pressure on them to do so. And, you know, it looks like Duke is probably the best team in the nation. Cam Boozer, probably the best player in the nation. I don't know if they're going to be the team that goes the distance, but there's just so much chaos that happens in the March Madness tournament. And I feel like we're going to be looking at all of it once it's wrapped up here, and either, you know, a typical blue blood is going to walk away the champion, or a team that we just haven't expected, and us as Michigan State fans are probably going to be a little bit disappointed.
I don't, obviously, and I don't want to agree with you, because it would mean that Michigan would not be the last team standing, which is what I want. But as I talked about when I talked about with Graham Couch on Chris and Company, at a certain point you have to do it, and until it happens, we've kind of reached this place of like I'm going to hold off. I think that this is much like last year's bracket, extremely top heavy. I think that those top 3 seeds, whether it's Duke, Arizona, Michigan, have established themselves, and it's kind of been that way for a good majority of the season. I think that when I look at this bracket with the Big Ten, it's very similar to how this regular season played out, which is the fact that I see a lot of pretty to really good teams. And pretty/really good teams can make it to the second weekend. Great teams get to the third weekend. Great teams win the national championship. And I think when you look at this year's Big Ten standings in the regular season, you had Michigan, who ultimately ended up standings-wise being head and shoulders above pretty much everybody. And then you have that middle tier that's, all kind of close to each other. Whether it's, Purdue was the 7th seed in their own conference tournament and won this thing. So whether it's Michigan State, Nebraska, Purdue, Illinois, I will agree with you, though it wouldn't shock me if we see as many as 2 Big Ten teams in the Final Four. I think that a team that is stumbling in a little bit, even though they got a high seed, that people are starting to doubt, that I still think has a ceiling of a third weekend team, is Illinois, just because Illinois can efficiently score the basketball. And I think for 2 games, 4 games, if you get into that type of hot stretch where you're shooting the ball effectively, that's a great equalizer. That's how upsets get pulled in this tournament. I think Illinois' best basketball has not been played since they lost that game to Michigan State in Breslin. Big Ten's a physical conference. I could see them being a team that just needed to make it out of Big Ten play. But we're talking natty here. The only one of these teams that I look at and think, you know what, this is a team that can win 6 in a row, it is Michigan. And there's been Big Ten teams in the past that I felt like had that potential. Michigan State a few times. You brought up 14 earlier. 16, I felt like they had that potential. You look at the Wisconsin teams, those back-to-back years of 14 and 15 with Bo Ryan, who were so close to winning it. Obviously, Michigan got to the national championship twice. It's very strange because for a conference that has not won the big one in a quarter of a century, it's not like they haven't been on the precipice. That's what's so surprising about this, is that they've gotten an endless number of programs into the national championship. Just off the top of my head, Michigan State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State has been there. I'm not going to include teams like UCLA, who were not a part of the conference when they made it there. So it's obviously possible. Michigan at their best, I've said from the beginning, is as good as anyone's best, but no LJ Kaysen, and you are staring a 25, potentially 26-year drought in the face. And once you get to that point, I think it's kind of a I'll believe it when I see it thing. So hate to agree with you on that. Not overwhelmingly confident, but I think as a whole, you will ultimately be proven to be correct in this instance. So that will do it for the I'll Say This segment. We will be back. We are going to talk a little bit of Pistons stuff because Paul Pierce, of all people, I guess this isn't anything abnormal. He works in media, and I feel like the '08 Celtics every few weeks say something stupid. Made a comment about Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons that probably ruffled a few feathers. We're going to talk about whether or not I agree with it, disagree with it. We will be back here in just a second. It is Big Play Detroit. All right, we are back. Segment number 5. It is time for our Explain Yourself segment. And Austin, I will let you share this one. This week's Explain Yourself. Sorry, I got him screwed up. This week's Explain Yourself has to do with a comment Paul Pierce made about the hopefully back on track Detroit Pistons, who had a much better week this week. Still not great. Still probably going through, by definition, their rough patch, but their goals are very much in front of them, which is a term I use all the time. What was the comment that Paul Pierce made? Let's break it down.
So, in full, he said, unless you're bigger than life like LeBron, it's hard to be the face of the league playing for Detroit. He can be MVP this year, he can win a championship, and still wouldn't probably be considered the face of the league just because he's in Detroit.
Okay, let's unwrap that because I think, and it's a good segment or a good topic because I think that it allows us to expand beyond just basketball here. We're talking face of the league, right? Cade Cunningham really doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. The guy's had an MVP caliber season. He has been everything that you would want a number one overall pick to emerge into. He's been a franchise savior, a franchise changer. Okay. And I understand in many ways what Paul Pierce is saying. And in a lot of ways, I do agree with it. In fact, I'll go as far as to say, if we're talking face of the league, he's probably correct. When was the last time, and let's, some people might try to dispute it, when was the last time that a Detroit athlete was in any of the major sports, was truly the face of their sport? I can think of 1.5 that are arguable. I think that Miggy, in the time in which he was winning the Triple Crown and winning MVPs, maybe not the face of the league, but at the very least the best player, and that puts you on the Mount Rushmore, I feel like, of being the face of the league. And his counterpart, who's now back here, I think Verlander for a second wanted that smoke. Verlander was a guy who was on TV all the time, dating and now married to a supermodel. He was appearing on late-night TV shows. Like, he kind of had that vibe. With that said, I don't think there's any other athlete that we've had here, at least in the 21st century, that you can say was the face of the league. And the point that he made about, unless you're larger than life like LeBron, right, well, that's, okay. There's maybe 3 players ever that are, rank up there with LeBron in terms of just overall brand and talent, greatness, what have you. So I understand his point. My counter is that doesn't matter to me. And I don't think it should matter to any Pistons fans. I know that people want to run with the whole disrespect thing, and people don't like respecting Detroit or whatever. And that's, first of all, if the guy wins the MVP, that's a lot of respect. Okay, a lot of respect has been put on your name if you're the best freaking player in the world for an entire year. So I think geographically, and if we're just talking from a market standpoint, it's probably correct unless there is someone who is just generational. Because look, who knows? I mean, the face of the league in the NFL for the last decade has been a guy for Kansas City. Weird things can happen. But if we're just talking NBA right now, he's probably correct. But I just don't think it's something that Cade particularly thinks about, and I don't think it's something that the team particularly cares about. I think when you talk about being the face of a sport, I think you have to try. I remember having this argument about Mike Trout, where Mike Trout was the best player in the world for a decade, but some of these guys like Judge and Ohtani, you can tell that matters to them. When you can't, every single commercial break, they're advertising another product, they're appearing on shows. That stuff does matter. Like, it's almost like running for political office. Like, you have to put yourself out there. So I think he's correct in the sense that I don't see any Detroit Piston ever being the face of the NBA unless there is a LeBron-type unicorn. But I don't think it's something that should particularly matter to Pistons fans. They are set up very well in the future. This will be the last point, but is anyone going to act like Nikolai Jokic is Mr. Charisma? No. I mean, I've seen the guy in interviews. He doesn't even like basketball. It's not even the most important thing to him. But I don't think there's any Denver Nuggets fan who looks at this and say, oh, God, that's really a disappointment. They've won a championship with him. He's won multiple MVPs. Hopefully they do the same thing in Detroit with Cade. So that's my general thoughts on it. I don't know what yours are.
Yeah, honestly, to me, it really just depends on a couple of things, Are you going out there and winning championships and winning MVPs and doing all of the things that a face of the league should? But also, are you a pretty marketable person and player in general? Someone like Mike Trout, he was unbelievable as a player. I could not believe what I was watching for a decade there. But he was playing in Los Angeles, but not with the Dodgers, with the Angels, and, half the country was going to bed by the time that he was playing on this team that only made the playoffs once with him and didn't win a single game. So, he just was not, being pushed out there, whether that's on him or the people around him, to be this face of the league person. Now, I think there can be, a few faces of the league at the same time in different sports. You pointed out Miguel Cabrera and Justin Verlander at the time. I think there was, a hitter and a pitcher in tandem with them at that same time that were all kind of faces of the league, because you also had Albert Pujols and Clayton Kershaw. And I think they were all kind of, carrying baseball at that point as the face of the league. I don't really think it should matter, but I think if you are going out there and winning championships and MVPs and those kinds of things, it really becomes hard to deny. Like the Patriots, I'm sure before Tom Brady went there and that turned into a dynasty, I'm sure somebody would have said, oh, nobody's going to be the face of the league as the quarterback of the New England Patriots. And you brought up Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. Going back to the NBA, both LeBron and Steph Curry are in their twilight years now. They're getting older, and it's time for a new generation. I think Wemby is definitely going to be one of those guys because he's just an absolute freak. But I think Cade Cunningham, he could be one of those guys who's a face of the league because he does it all. He shoots well, he passes well, he rebounds well. I think he's marketable. He's leading a team that's the 1 seed in the East right now. He's still young. He still has, a lot to prove. But if he goes out there and does it, I don't see why he couldn't be just because he's in Detroit.
And this will be the last point I'll make. I think he would benefit, and Duran's been great, but I think a lot of times these face of the leagues become a little bit more marketable when they have a legitimate number 2 option that's also a star. You bring up Steph Curry, and look, Steph Curry speaks for himself. He's the greatest shooter of all time, but the Splash Brothers were every bit as marketable as Steph Curry was when people talk about those two guys together. Obviously, Jordan, Pippen. LeBron, well, obviously was one of the faces of the league. I don't think, by the time, Kobe was kind of on the way out, didn't really become the guy. And I think I would argue his best seasons didn't come until he had that run in Miami with D Wade. And obviously you throw Bosh there in as part of that big three. So that's just something worth noting. I think Wembanyama is a great example. I think Anthony Edwards is another guy that wants to smoke. I think he wants to kind of be the face of the league. So ultimately what's going to matter most is wins and losses. And if Cade Cunningham is hoisting a Larry O'Brien trophy, I don't really think anyone's going to discuss whether or not he is the face of the league. But here's what the last point I'll say. The fact that we're having this discussion about Cade is a wonderful, wonderful sign, because it wasn't that long ago, and I swear to God, this organization had no good players. And now we're talking about a guy who is a top 5, soon-to-be perennial all-star MVP caliber talent. So it is very exciting in that aspect. Big Play Bets are brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop, big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night, and now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Here's how it works. Build any college hoops parlay you like. Early tip, the rivalry game, the ranked matchup, the late night West Coast shootout. Mix spreads, totals, props, whatever fits your read of the slate. Then you just apply your profit boost and instantly bump up that potential payout. Go safe, go spicy, go with the team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com/BigPlay to get started. FanDuel, play your game.
Must be 21 plus and present in select states. Minimum 2-leg parlay required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable Boost Builder tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amounts. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-MY-RESET.
We're looking for an interesting one to talk about in terms of gambling odds for this tournament. And I didn't even mean for this to be a thing to kind of stick with the Big Ten here, but I was just taking an eye at the bracket, looking at some potential upsets, but even beyond that, looking at some potential odds for upsets. And I want to address a team that you brought up earlier that I think is extremely vulnerable, but also under a heck of a lot of pressure as they go into March Madness. And that is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Now, as of the time of this recording, they are currently 13.5-point favorites against Troy, the Troy Trojans. But a couple things to bring up here. Wonderful year for Nebraska. 2 seed in the conference tournaments. Started the year 20-0. Had the huge win over Michigan State, which kind of propelled them into that kind of next level where people were talking about them as potentially a top 10, top 20 team. Arguably the biggest, at least Big Ten win in the history of that school. They have never won an NCAA tournament game, as you brought up earlier, Austin. Another thing, they're 6-6 in their last 12. I think that Nebraska, and we kind of see this every year, is one of those teams that came on very strong and went from being a nice story to all of a sudden being a team that people were maybe expecting to contend for something. Hoiberg has done a wonderful job there, and he'll continue to. And that streak will be broken. It is bananas that we live in a world where Nebraska has never won, where there's any Power 4 program that's never won an NCAA tournament game, quite frankly. I mean, once Northwestern did it, and they've now, I think, won 2, like, at that point, anybody who hasn't, like, you got to pick it up at some point. But I bring up pressure, and I bring up pressure against inexperienced teams that aren't used to playing in the tournament. And you're talking about Nebraska going up against a Troy team that loves full court pressure. They love to draw traps. They love to try to get you to turn the ball over. And I think that what has gone poorly for Nebraska over the last 12 games of this season, that went well against Michigan State, and it went well for them for a good majority of the game they played against Michigan, has been their outside shooting. When the outside shooting isn't necessarily working, and we talk about in this tournament, those outliers, the offense has a tendency to not run particularly with a particular sense of fluidity. Sorry, excuse me there. Going back to the gambling odds, this is a 4-13 matchup. Nebraska minus 1,200 on the money line. Troy plus 750. Every year when I fill out a bracket, I put at least one 11, 12, 13 seed in the Sweet 16. And I make sure to go with a few upsets. I think that in this particular case, you're talking about a Nebraska team that is vulnerable, or at least has been down the stretch, that has a lot of pressure on them to do something that they've never done in program history. And I think that if we're talking odds, plus 750 on the money line for Troy as a 4-13 matchup, I think is glorious. And I mean, even if you kind of want to look beyond that, just for them to cover at plus 13.5 is only minus 110. So some really good odds for Troy. I think that Nebraska is exceptionally vulnerable at this point in the season. Down the stretch, they were not particularly impressive. I think the pressure's going to get to them. That is my gambling pick for the week. I guess I should ask you this before the second. You have anything to add to that?
If Nebraska basketball is anything like their football program, people have been saying Nebraska football is coming back. They're back. They're going to be a contender forever. And if they're anything like their football program, it's a pretty safe bet that this won't happen. Hoiberg has done a wonderful job, and as you said, I think he will continue to. But they've stumbled down the stretch, and, if you're looking for an upset pick, this is about as safe as any.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, I think with a lot of these March Madness games, and we see it every year, but I think it's especially a team like Nebraska that makes them even more vulnerable, is that, like, if you just keep it close and you find these teams that are playing desperately on the verge of their season ending, and it's something like it comes down to free throws. This was a team in Nebraska that lost a huge lead to Purdue a few weeks ago. I think they're capable of potentially doing something like that again. So that's the one to watch out for. Generally speaking, I think the Big Ten's going to have a good showing in this tournament. I don't think they'll win the national championship, but I think they'll have a good showing because I think that there's high ceilings with a lot of these teams. Set like Wisconsin, obviously, what they've been able to do scoring the ball in the second half of the season, twice against Michigan. Illinois brought it up. Michigan State always with a ton of experience. I think the one team in this conference that I look at and say, I think their ceiling might be shrinking is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Though, hey, look, you brought it up, but if they win, we're getting ever so closer to saying Nebraska and Indiana are both basketball schools. No, I screwed that up. God damn it, Austin, you can cut that out. Or don't, whatever. We're potentially living in a world where Indiana is a football school and Nebraska is a basketball school, is the point I was trying to make before I royally screw that up. Okay, I think that's probably a wonderful sign to get out of here for today. I'll just go ahead and plug my social medias. At Castellani 2014 on Twitter. We are at Chris Castellani on TikTok. CastellaniContent.com is where all our content can be found, and of course this podcast can be found on Twitter, and we're going to continue to promote it and everything, audio form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what have you. So thank you to everyone at Big Play, and thank you to everyone who's continued to support this. This show is going to continue to evolve, and it's going to change, and it's going to get better, and your support will go a long way with that. So Austin, do the honors, man.
Yeah, I'll just drop a couple socials real quick. I'm on X at Austin Sisler, spelled Cisler. On Instagram at Austin Sisler _20. I've got a link tree in both of my bios that include like a portfolio and as well as a YouTube channel. I do have a channel. Kind of just archive some of the things that Chris and I create, like video edits and things like that. If you want to check that out. I want to thank everyone at Big Play for giving us this opportunity. And if anyone has a business or anything that they'd like to sponsor on our show, feel free to reach out to Chris or myself.
Yep, that'll be the last point that I'll make here is that Austin did such a wonderful job coming up with a full document, not so much a spreadsheet. I want to get it right. A document of what potential ad opportunities look like. They could extend to Big Play. They could extend to the post-game videos we do. They could extend to Chris and Company. There are multiple options that we are going to be offering. And if you have a business or even if it's a YouTube channel or something that you'd be interested in promoting, our DMs are open on social media as well. Pretty much all platforms you can find us there. So that will do it for today's episode of Big Play Detroit. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. I will talk to y'all again real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.